Greetings and welcome back to the Dr. J vlog series. It's been a minute since I last posted. Actually, that it goes back to last month. Been busy for reasons that I might explain in future vlogs. But for now, suffice it to say, I'm happy to be back. I'm happy to share my latest vlog on thoughts and reflections, the sub-series on why I'm not wealthy. Maybe you are. Maybe you're extremely wealthy. Maybe you're at the other end of the spectrum. Who knows? Somewhere in between, likely. But the bottom line is that I'm not a good business person. In fact, I'm terrible at business. It's not that I don't understand the core principles. I do. Most people do, I would think. Supply and demand, market scarcity, know your industry, and find niche. Having high quality products and solid marketing strategies, that should always help. Avoiding high interest transactions, having financial discipline. Customer experience and satisfaction are important. Buy low, sell high, basic accounting principles, etc. My point is that if you're reasonably intelligent, disciplined, and willing to commit the necessary time and energy, you can probably earn a decent, perhaps even an exceptional salary, depending on your qualifications and background, etc. But of course, you have to be willing to set financial goals, and you have to be willing to get after the income or pursue different sources of revenue. You'll likely need some business acumen. Most important, you almost certainly have to love making money. Not like, love. Well, that has to be your passion, I should think. And that's where I truly fall short. And why I'm a terrible businessman. I've never been driven by the goal of making money. Now, let me be clear here. I like money, probably about as much as the average person does. I enjoy earning a good paycheck or receiving some compensation for a job well done. Who doesn't? But I don't love money. And I'm not driven to make a lot of money. And so I haven't. I've literally never set making good money as a goal of mine. Many others have, of course. Again, it doesn't make me better or worse. It's just that hasn't been my primary focus in life. My best friends and many of my family members are extremely rich. They've made lots of money. Some are multi-millionaires. One or two, I think, have tens of millions of dollars, which is great for them. And by the way, some of those multimillionaires are absolutely wonderful people, by the way, right? They're great folks. So I suppose if my best friends, for example, had done really scummy things to make their money and screwed over lots of people to get rich, or they were in the Epstein files or whatever, I don't think that they'd be my friends. But unless they're hiding something from me, they've become rich by running good, honest businesses, working hard, pursuing some really good financial opportunities, and so forth. So why didn't I do that? And why don't I do that for that matter? And again, the shorter answer is simply that I don't love making money. I like making money. I just don't love it. I have different priorities. Like most folks, I tend to invest my time and energy much more in what I love and what I most value. And the fact is that money just isn't exceptionally high on my particular list. And again, I'm not saying to imply that that's not important, that money's not important in this world. Of course it is. Or that somehow, again, I'm above others simply because I have other different priorities. So again, I like money, but I don't love money. And I'm sure you see the difference. It's the difference between saying, I'd like to be able to play the piano versus I'd love to play the piano. If you'd love to play the piano, you'd be playing the piano. More often, when someone says, I'd love to play the piano, and yet they don't, what they're really saying is that I'd like to play the piano, but it's not really a passion of mine or a priority in my life. So there's the challenge, or the question I would ask of each of you. What do you truly love in this world? What are you passionate about? What do you want to spend your precious time here on this earth doing? What are your priorities? And again, that's the reason that I'm not rich. The priorities that I have in the areas where I overwhelmingly invest my creative energies generally are not the ones that make people a lot of money, unless you get lucky or go viral in some context. So let me elaborate. So here are just 5 areas where I'm most driven to invest my time, my personal life, and my creative energies. So this is what I sort of personally value above all else in my own little life. And again, I'm sure you have your own priorities, okay? And so if you like, think of this as me at my most selfish or self-interested in the sense of pursuing what I believe to be most important, interesting, and fulfilling. So I love investing a lot of myself and my life energy, as many people do, in my partner and our 5 young men, probably above just about anything else. Not because of genetic selfishness, as I'm not sure I'll be passing along my genes beyond the current generation if no one reproduces, but rather it's about social spheres of influence, as with all of us, I would think, to a certain degree. So who am I closest to, and whom do I care most about in this world? Okay, selfishly, my wife, my boys, several other family members, for example, my mother-in-law, who we take care of, who just turned 98, my closest friends, etc. And like you, probably, I care more about the people that I see and interact with on a regular basis. These are the most intimate people in my lives, my most intimate social sphere. And we all have them to varying degrees and varying sizes. In fact, the reality is that by giving of ourselves and our creative energies to help us stay connected, to support, to love them, well, that doesn't usually bring in much money. In fact, quite the opposite. Most of us end up expending a lot more of our time and energy and even financial resources to help ensure the health and well-being of those closest to us in our lives, the people we love. Second, I love helping people in general. I'm definitely at my most selfish when I allow myself to be more generous with my time and my energy towards others, and quite beyond the immediacy of my own family and closest friends. So I love, for example, helping my students learn, and I love helping them to get jobs or get into grad programs or what have you. In fact, that's the more general principle. I love helping people achieve their goals or simply to feel better about themselves. A guy I was working with the other day was having some real concerns about one of his young sons. And I suggested that he give the kid a try to connect with him, which he was able to do. And after he hung up the phone, he was so psyched because he'd connected with his son. His son was feeling better after that brief conversation. And so I just kind of supportively grabbed his arm and said something like, "Hey, way to go." And he had such a smile on his face. Anyway, I'm sure you get the point. I get a real kick then out of helping people, and I get a kick out of watching them succeed, achieve their goals, whatever those might be. Or, for that matter, I get a kick out of just being kind to people. Again, I'm selfish. I feel better about myself the kinder I am towards others. And again, that, for the most part, doesn't generate much revenue. Dr. J, but what about what you actually do for a living, your job? Well, I'm quite lucky. I knew I wanted to be a university professor, at least at some point in my early 20s. I decided that's what I wanted to do, and I wanted to live that particular lifestyle. And I didn't know all the twists and turns that I'd take to finally get there along the way. But in fact, I didn't get my dream job. I may have said this before, until, the one that I love, until I was 41 years old. So if you're in your 20s or 30s, don't feel bad if you haven't latched on to that perfect job or that dream job, or you haven't arrived yet. Some of us take a little bit longer. If you have, great. That's fantastic. And so anyway, now near the end of my career, quite frankly, I make a very good salary at my particular job. But again, it's not the money that's ever driven me. You can earn a lot more money, quite frankly, outside of academia, especially if you parlay your PhD into industry or any number of other fields. I never did that. I just always loved teaching and writing and doing research. I spent far more time writing academic research articles and a few books that I quite like, that I'm quite proud of. Yeah, there we go, along the way. There's that one. There's the one that I just put out earlier this year. But these don't typically end up on the New York Times bestseller list. And for the nearly 100 articles and book chapters I've written, academic in nature, again, relatively few people are ever going to read those. And I don't really get any money for doing any of that. Okay? But the knowledge that I produce, while it obviously it helps keep me employed, it just doesn't yield much financial return. Okay? Not many people are going to buy my books. Again, they're not on the New York Times bestseller list. I guess I could always get lucky and do some things, find some kind of niche market that, where I could eventually become a bestseller, but that's not likely in my case, given what I tend to write about, what I tend to study, and so on. And here's the thing, even if I won the lottery tonight, I'd still show up the next day to do what I love, the teaching and the research. I wouldn't just quit my job. No way. So I know I'm going to continue to spend most of my professional life, or the rest of my professional life, doing the stuff that's not going to really make me any scratch, okay, any real money. All right, and fourth, one of my very greatest loves is creating music. In fact, it's probably the single greatest personal passion of mine, okay? I love writing. I love playing music. I love, especially on piano and guitar. I love recording music. And as many of you know, once again, shameless self-promotion, I have this album of mine that came out, about a year and a half ago now, early in 2025. And it's something that I genuinely love to do, all right? And I suppose if I'd been an exceptional musician or had this angelic voice, this stunning voice, or if I were a tremendous songwriter and I caught a few breaks along the way, maybe I could have made some money. Probably not in my case, but alas, as John Fogerty used to sing, it ain't me, it ain't me. I ain't no musical genius. And the world will carry on just fine with just perhaps a few hundred people ever having heard my music. I've sold about 100 copies of the album, nowhere close to going viral. Taylor Swift, Beyonce won't return my calls. And I still need to sell about 500 more just to break even for the production costs of this particular value. And it's not unlike my YouTube channel, right, where I have not quite 500 people yet subscribed. Nothing like the content creators who have hundreds of thousands or even millions of subscriptions. And I have no viral videos, no real clickbait of any kind. But again, that's okay. I love making music, and I love making the videos and the vlogs. And again, unless Taylor Swift somehow hears my music and promotes it amongst her nearly 300 million Instagram followers and almost 70 million YouTube subscribers, I'm probably never going to earn or exceed anything more than maybe 500 or 1,000 followers of any kind. Okay, and so finally, just to wrap things up, I love creating beautiful things in nature, from planting trees to landscaping to building stuff like decks and planter boxes, and what I've been spending most of the last little while doing, which is building a cabana. So I love working on the land. I love working with my hands and doing everything from just general gardening to beautifying spaces to even just cutting grass. It makes me happy. But it just doesn't really make me any money. I've done some landscaping and deck building for others, but I've really never done it to make money, more just for the love of the work and the creative process. And so a couple of weeks ago, for example, I did a small landscaping job for someone, and I told them I'd charge them $100 for what I guessed would be about 3 hours work. So, that's a pretty good deal, I think, for in this day and age. But a pretty good deal for them, not so much for me, but it's fine. But silly me, I underestimated how much work was going to be involved, and mainly due to this really stubborn stump that I, at the last minute, agreed I would take out and get rid of for them. Anyway, long story short, I spent about 5 hours, maybe even a little bit more, on the job. And so at the end, the guy asked how much I owed. And I said, well, we agreed on $100. And he said, well, but you ended up working, much longer on the job. And I said, yeah, but we agreed on $100. And if it took me longer, then that's on me. Right? Again, in short, I honor my word. I believe in integrity. And, and I'm a terrible businessman. I can't charge people or tell them after the fact I'm going to charge them more for work that I did. If I needed to charge them more, then I should have said, hey, listen, this is going to take a couple of hours. Can we, are you willing to pay for this or whatever? You know what I mean? Just basic principles. But again, much like my teaching and research, it's not the money that really drives me. It's the doing, the helping others with their spaces and places. And that's partly why I love the landscaping work so much, right? That's my main pay, to see in this case, the customer or the person happy with their yard, with their living space, to feel at peace. That's what I love to do. And if I could, I'd definitely spend more time, planting trees or maybe just helping beautify people's properties and landscapes. I'm definitely, when I retire, I'm going to spend a lot more time planting trees, among other things. So obviously, I'm never going to be financially well off with any of this stuff. And while I turn 65 with my next birthday, I know I'm not going to be retiring anytime soon. I can't afford to. I suck at making money. And so I'll probably be mowing somebody's lawn, for $25 when I'm 75 years old. I'll do that for you. Really? Old man? Yeah, I got to make ends meet. And so to this day, maybe like many of you, I just kind of look at the bank account and I try to make sure that I have enough to pay all the bills each month. And so, yeah, I don't make a ton of money. But I love my family, the family that I've chosen to create. I love helping other people. I love working at the university, the teaching and the research and the writing, and I love making music, and I love planting trees and making landscapes beautiful. And through these loves and a few others, for example, I love learning languages, I hope I make people smile. I hope I help people along the way. I hope I make people think. I hope I create stuff or make music that people appreciate, or that brings joy or knowledge or beauty into their lives. I hope I'm helping to make the world a better place. I just don't really make a lot of money, but that's because I'm selfish. And I focus my time and energy on the things that I love. And these things, again, just don't pay a lot. So again, I'll probably never retire. I'll probably just keep doing what I love. All right, as ever, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, dole out hugs in abundance, and do the things that you love. And we'll see you next time.